What is the most chaotic good act that you've ever witnessed? My former employer had a metered parking lot. The lot was heavily monitored and they'd ticket you like the minute your crap expired. It was decidedly not good for business. People want to be able to linger in a coffee shop, you know? Besides, there was no reason for that lot to be metered anyhow. It was barely even adjacent to anything but our shop. Well, the meter just started breaking. All the time. It would get fixed by the city, but then a few days later, it'd be smashed or jammed or whatever. We asked if people would be towed, and the city was like, no meter, no tickets. One night I stayed a bit late to clean a freezer. When I left, I spotted my boss breaking the freshly fixed meter. She was like, "Yep, guess I'm a criminal, huh?" I once counseled one of my students in my homeroom to quit school, get a GED, and enroll in an apprenticeship program. Had I been caught, I would have been fired, since policy was to try and motivate all students to graduate. The kid was failing all of his classes, which were 9th grade courses, but he was smart, working a full-time job, and was already 18 years old and had a crappy home life. Honestly, that's the smartest path for a determined and hardworking kid who doesn't thrive in academia. Good for you. He probably makes good money and has a stable job now. I hope so. He didn't take the advice right away. As long as he was enrolled as a full-time student, his family kept getting a payout from funds due to his father's earlier death. He only came to school because his mum needed that payout to help raise his younger siblings. He planned to keep it up until he aged out of the funding thing in a few years, and then he could finally quit coming to school, get a GED, change jobs to something 9 to 5 finally. So he and I made a sort of pact of, if I don't harass you about your schoolwork, will you at least pretend that I do try to get you to do your schoolwork so that the principal doesn't figure out that I let you sleep in my class? I'll let you sleep all you need because I know you work late and you care about your little siblings. Meanwhile, here are practice materials for the GED. Do them when you can so you don't forget anything. As soon as you can do it, go and take that test. This confused a few classmates since they knew I wouldn't allow them to sleep in class even though I allowed him to do so without penalty. This was back in the late 1950s when my granddad was just a teenager, 14 to 15 years old, and he lived in a rural area in Arizona. This relatively new family in town was arousing suspicion because the wife and kids were always banged up. My grandpa's stepfather spoke to the man of the house and told him that people could see what he was doing to his family and he needed to stop. When he didn't stop, my grandpa's stepdad excused himself for dinner one night and left the house for the evening. The following day on the way to school, my granddad was on the bus and drove across a field where Family Man McGee was tied to one of the posts, beat to holy heck. My granddad, the bus driver, and the older student helped untie the guy and got him onto the bus so that he could get back home. No one talked about it, but apparently my grandpa's stepdad and a couple of other local guys caught up to the guy and beat the crap out of him so that he'd know how his defenseless family had it. Seeing he excused himself paints such a good picture of him politely dabbing the corners of his mouth with his napkin and slowly pushing back from the table, just to go and grab this dude and whip his butt. Haha, dope. This is indeed a satisfying story, one that we should probably try and replace with getting the cops and CPS involved in the modern day and age, though. When I used to walk home from class at night, there's this guy that would always call me gangster, major respect, but never anything else. For the reference, I'm a 19-year-old short Hawaiian girl and not very threatening looking. We'll call this guy JD. He'd ask how my day was, if I'm getting home okay, if I had any problems getting home. I began to look forward to it when I was walking home from class. A couple of times I'd be having a bad day, and this guy, who was outside, rain or shine, would always say hi to me. One day I was walking back, and he was talking to a buddy. Said buddy looked over at me and whistled, to which JD whacked him on the shoulder and said angrily, "Show some respect," and smiled at me and said, "Hope you have a good night, gangster. I hope he's doing all right." That video of the guy picking up litter thrown out of his car before physically throwing the passenger out. Threw into a park, turned on his hazard lights, waved the vehicle behind to alert them, and finally picked up and throwing out the trash. I don't care if it's staged or real, it was a delight to watch. A friend of mine had a roommate that stole a painting that was given to my friend. The roommate claimed that it was his and refused to return it, so I broke into their house at 2 in the morning and stole the painting back. I didn't tell anyone and kept it at my house until the roommate moved out. My friend and his painting are now reunited. The kid who stole it was a real piece of work. He would do this kind of stuff to everyone. Multiple people that I know have had this complaint about him, and he also brags about stealing stuff from people. The painting was given to my friend as a present while he lived with the roommate for the first time. They both moved out at different times but chose to live together in a new house. During the moving process, the roommate took the painting and hid it from my friend for weeks. Then at the new place, he revealed the painting to my friend and explained that he wouldn't be giving it back. I caught wind of this story and decided to take matters into my own hands. The city of Sao Paulo never cleaned its tunnels, so they got black from all the cars' fumes over the years. This guy cleaned skull drawings in the soot using a rag and some water. The city sent officials to try and stop him, but hey, he was cleaning, no vandalism there. Eventually they sent someone with a hose to clean this guy's vandalism for good, only to discover how dirty the walls truly were. That reminds me of the one where people spray-painted wangs on potholes in the road to force the city to fix them faster. Something similar is happening in Cologne in Germany. They have these incredibly dirty walls, so some people took it upon themselves to do art with pressured sand. The city is against it, so they clean the parts of the walls where there is art. It's called reverse graffiti. If the city catches you, they fine you, since it's treated like real graffiti. There was a guy in my historical town of 800 people named Casey. Casey was the town police. We didn't have an actual police force, just the sheriffs from the county an hour away. So Casey was the law. He rode around on his bike, beating up people who did things like break into cars or harass people. Now, Casey himself wasn't exactly an upstanding citizen. He moved around a lot and dabbled in crystal, he grew huge green herb plants in the anise fields behind town, and was generally the kind of guy who looked shady. Except everyone in town knew Casey and everyone trusted him completely. If someone had a problem with the admittedly large population of crystal heads in town, they'd go find Casey and he'd bash heads in and shame people until they either left or towed the line. Imagine an incredibly white trash paladin with a series of crippling vices and a children's bicycle, and you have Casey. Casey also made wax out of green herb in his spare time. This is unsurprising because Casey can make literally anything. Anyway, I'm out of town one day and Casey comes knocking on my door looking to share his new bounty. When I don't answer the door, he decides to leave me some. A normal person would have put the wax on some waxed paper or in a container and then left it on my porch. Not Casey. Casey smeared a very generous amount of green herb wax all over my metal doorknob. Being Casey, he forgets to leave a note to tell me he did this. I came home late that night and put my hand on the doorknob and ended up screaming at my lungs because it was unexpectedly sticky. It was good wax though. About the Great British Bake Off hosts. When contestants do cry, out of frustration or disappointment generally, Mel and Sue stand near them and use unairable language so the embarrassing footage is tainted and won't make it into the final edit. And strangely enough, I've heard that the unairable language is predominantly brand names rather than cursing. Imagining Mel and Sue having an entire conversation completely in brand names, simultaneously ruining footage and making the upset contestant laugh. Two older British women standing next to a man crying over a souffle just chanting the C word over and over. I love this image and I will think of it whenever I'm feeling low. Thank you, imaginary versions of Mel and Sue. When I was in high school, I was an extremely troubled teen. Legal trouble, substance usage, violence, mental illness, failing every class, the whole gamut. When I was in 11th grade, I was put into a special education program for people like me. And I did wonderfully. I adored my teachers and vice versa. One teacher in particular was amazing. She helped me set goals, get on track. She even helped me find my first real job. My senior year, I was doing really well in my classes, but this school was set up like a college in that you needed a set amount of credits to graduate, and I was woefully short. I still needed something like 22 or 24 credits, completely impossible to make up in my last year. Even though I was doing well, there was no chance I was going to graduate. So my lovely teacher started digging through my record. She somehow converted my community service, treatment stays, lockup time, and all the consequences for my behavior into credits. She turned institutionalization into fricking elective credits. By the end of my senior year, I had 1/2 credit to make up in summer school. I was able to walk with my class for graduation in June and received my high school diploma in August. To this day, I have no idea how she did it, but she absolutely changed my life. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. A Brazilian substance trafficker has been praised on social media as the modern-day Robin Hood after he kidnapped 2 nurses, stole vaccines and syringes, and ordered the medical staff to inoculate residents in one of the poorest areas in the country's southeast. Thomas Vieira Gomes has made headlines in the local press for acts of charity over the past year, even as authorities have issued successive warrants for his arrest. His most recent gesture of generosity to combat yellow fever, which has swept poverty-stricken areas of Brazil, has seen him lauded primarily as a hero rather than a villain. The substance gang leader, known on the street as 2N, held hostage 2 nurses from a vaccination center before transporting them and their equipment to one of the poorest favelas in Rio de Janeiro. The Latin American television station Telesur reported that Gomez's gang oversaw the nurses as they administered vaccinations over a 2-hour period in the Salgueiro favela. Once they'd finished administering the injections, they were returned to their workplace. In a report on the incident, the health workers said their kidnappers had treated them well and without any aggression. They said they'd complied with the hostage takers because many Salgueiro residents hadn't been given access to immunization centers. Despite the illegality of Gomez and his gang's actions, officials have praised the hostage-taking. Carlos Mink, a state deputy and a former minister of the environment, wrote on Twitter that the immunizations had been done as an act of public service. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. I once caused traffic to come to a standstill on a 5-lane highway because a dog was running around and narrowly avoiding being hit several times. I pulled my car to the shoulder and jumped out to try and get the dog off the highway. Seeing this, several people got out of their cars to help. After about 10 minutes of us trying to chase this dog off the highway, the owner comes and the dog jumps right into her car. Everyone else gets in their car and leaves while I'm talking to the very relieved owner who couldn't believe all of these people got out to try and save her dog. Once she gets in her car and leaves, I realize I'm on the opposite side of a 5-lane highway from my car and no one is stopping to let me pass. Finally, a trucker must have noticed my predicament and starts cutting off traffic and slows down so that I could walk to get to my car. Another trucker follows suit and I'm able to get back to my car and back on the road. It wasn't until later that I realized how dangerous what I had done had been, but it was worth it to see the owner reunited with her dog. In conclusion, rallied an army of motorists to try and save a runaway dog. I was at a psychedelic rock concert in New York City that involved quite a bit of light moshing and crowd surfing. A really fun show overall. If you've never crowd surfed before, there's 2 main ways that it's usually done. Either you get up on the stage and jump off hoping that the crowd will catch you, or you ask a couple of strong-looking people around you to just lift you up. But at this concert, there was a third way. There was a big intimidating-looking guy in the middle of the mosh pit who apparently spent the entire concert down on all fours, getting people to jump off his back and start crowd surfing. He especially tried to wave in people who seemed nervous to try it. Overall, he must have gotten at least 50 people to crowd surf who had never tried it before. It was really a magical sight to behold. A guy at the local Dunkin' Donuts has to throw out donuts after someone tried to sue them for donating poisoned donuts or whatever. He gladly throws them out and then walks back inside. Whatever happens to them isn't any of his business, since it's trash anyway. He says he stopped trying to catch the mysterious garbage thief after 30 seconds of trying because he isn't paid enough to care. At the Dunkin' Donuts my brother worked at, a homeless guy would politely stand next to the dumpster. The employee would place the bag of expired donuts in the dumpster and close the lid, then homeless guy would open the dumpster and take them out. It was on video and the manager required that the rules be followed. It was very lawful neutral. I think this would really be lawful good. The employees obey the rules and the homeless man would wait until protocol had been followed and everyone benefited. In case anyone is wondering, yes, the narrator chose the topic that made him think about Dungeons & Dragons the most. What can I say? I'm obsessed. My grandma was a kindergarten teacher for 50 years. Yes, you heard that correctly. She retired at the mandatory age of 72. It was a small community, mostly economically okay, but some poverty. Every few years, Grandma would develop a case of the clumsy. She'd trip while watering plants, and wouldn't you know it, but she'd spill a bit of water on the child that was unwashed and wore the same clothes for weeks. Nothing for it but to make up for the mistake by giving him a bath and clean clothes. Then return the clothes she messed up after she had cleaned them. A case of clumsy would last the whole school year, and oddly enough, she'd tripped near the same child every time. The case of clumsy often meant that she miscounted her grandchildren every morning and made an extra lunch. "You there, would you mind taking this lunch so it doesn't go to waste?" There was this Thai infomercial about a lady who owns a marketplace, and she went to visit the people who rented her place and just started getting angry and wreaking havoc, breaking weighing scales, etc. She was filmed by the buyers and the video went viral and all these negative comments. Turns out the sellers she was angry with were playing tricks with the customers, like using rigged weighing scales, starting with 1 kilo. Wanksy would spray paint wangs around potholes so the government would fix them. Some people plant trees in potholes for the same reason. Be the change you want to see in the world. This one actually happened yesterday at work. A girl and her mum came in and got a few sandwiches, but the girl wanted a brownie. They were paying cash, but were like $3 short for the brownie. The girl didn't throw a fit or anything, but was pretty sad. I was just gonna let them take it, it's just a brownie, but before I can say anything, the guy behind them says, "I would like all but 5 of your brownies." Mind you, this is like 40 fricking brownies, which costs like $110 of just brownies. He proceeded to give the girl all of the brownies, and she needed 3 bags just to carry all of them. The girl was ecstatic, and everyone else was laughing their butts off. We'll never forget you, brownie man. I've never seen it personally, but I rather like Richard Ancrom's guerrilla public service. There was a sign on the freeway in Los Angeles area that was providing confusing directions, so he fabricated an overlay to Caltrans standards and installed it himself without any sort of government permission. Caltrans eventually found out, inspected it, and allowed it to stay. I like that eventually turned out to be almost a decade. My parents stole my neighbor's dog and rehomed it because they were mistreating it. My parents did this with a cat. The neighbor was throwing rocks at the cat because he didn't want the cat in the house. My dad confronted him and said, "F you, this is our cat now," and took the cat home. Our old tenants had a 14-year-old, declawed, flea-infested, super sweet kitty. She was so tiny, and when we kicked them out, he was going to just release the cat into the wild. So my dad said, "Go F yourself," and we took her in. She infested all of our other pets with fleas, but it was worth it. She got to live until 17 with us. So, you know how you'll have childhood friends, and eventually they go their separate ways, but you still stay in touch. My brother had a friend who got into crystal and had this little 8-pound, 8-month-old puppy. He would get high, blow smoke in the puppy's face, treat him badly, etc. One day he told a third friend from the group, "Man, I can't take care of this thing anymore. I'm just gonna dump him on the side of the road." So the second friend basically goes, "No, F that," and steals the dog the night before. A week goes by and he's being fostered at the good guy dog thief's house. He then asks my brother, "Hey man, your brother want a dog? I have a 9-pound wiener dog, who at the time could use a friend since I worked 9 hours a day and my wiener could be all alone." So of course I said, "Yeah, let's go visit this guy." I show up and unlock the back gate and am immediately met at eye level with 3 Great Danes. And running around in the bushes is this comically small, long-haired mutt. We go inside and I sit on the couch and the pup runs right up to me, gets in my lap, rolls over for a belly rub. It's like the guy never grew up in a crystal house. Needless to say, my wiener has a friend now. There's a group that does guerrilla ramp building to help with those mobility issues around the city. They've stepped up in so many of the areas that the city and businesses have been ineffective in maintaining code in, or outright illegally ignored it to the detriment of citizens. I freaking love them and I donate to them whenever I can. The next is the guys who spray paint wangs all over potholes so the city has to come out and fix them. If I see them doing this in real life one day, I'm stopping traffic to A, help, B, kiss them, because thank you. When I was still in my medical training in LA, I often saw a middle-aged gentleman putting coins into expired meters. The one time I saw a meter maid try to approach him and he ran off giggling. A few months later I saw him at a stop sign in a Maserati, basically the definition of chaotic good. This is a bizarre pseudo-crime with an illustrious history actually, as one commenter lays out. Paying meters for random strangers ahead of the meter enforcement personnel was part of a strange court case in my state recently. Basically, these college kids would walk around town just ahead of parking enforcement personnel, who were trying to issue tickets and feed the expired meters so no tickets could be written. This cost the city tens of thousands of dollars in tickets, so the city went after the kids for harassment. Lo and behold, after the city spent nearly $80,000 in legal expenses, the kids won because they were paying the meters and there's no law against that. I worked in daycare, and over the summer the kids had to bring their own lunch. One extremely undernourished and developmentally behind toddler only got things like chocolate frosting between slices of white bread for lunch. I started packing extra of my own lunch, with healthy stuff like yogurt and fresh vegetables, and sat her on my lap each lunchtime and coaxed her to eat it. It was totally against the rules and probably illegal, but the lead teacher and I couldn't just sit there and watch her literally eat frosting for lunch, so I got permission to take over myself. We just kept it quiet. I teach English as a foreign language to high schoolers. I have one class where the class clown is always trying to be disruptive, but his method is to shout encouragement whenever someone answers a question, like, "You a genius," or "You so intelligent." I have to act annoyed, because I know he'll stop doing it if he ever knew how much I freaking love it. Friend's mother found out her husband, my friend's father, was part of a group that made inappropriate content featuring children when the police showed up to arrest him. He had realized that they were about to get him, so was trying to escape the country via the local airport. He had told her his mother was sick and he was going to visit. She not only told the police where he was, but raced them to him, slide-tackled him at the airport before he disappeared, and was in the process of beating him to a pulp when the police arrived and pulled her off him. When my ex was arrested in front of our house for a similar offense, I said something along the lines of, "I want to kick his ass." The cop turned to me and with a very serious look on his face said, "Go ahead, we don't mind." That video where a guy paid for everyone's food if they were behind him just because two girls cut in front of him. I think it was at In-N-Out. The video's been reposted many times on any social media. Once in grade school, one of the kids was torturing another kid who was on the spectrum. He was running behind him and hitting him with a stick. They both ran right by me and I instinctively stuck my leg out and tripped the bully. He got bloody hands and knees for hitting the concrete. I got detention and a note sent home to my parents. I didn't care. I would have done it again. My parents took me out for ice cream, they were so proud of me. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.